As I was saying, let's start with volume. The question is, what kind of dynamics can we create with the relative volumes set by the faders on the console? Most people first think of the dynamics that you can create by moving the faders during the mix. In fact, this is an extremely powerful dynamic. When you change the volume of a sound during a mix, you can create a dynamic that is so powerful that it can overwhelm the song. The movement of the fader can be such a strong dynamic that it becomes the primary focus of the entire mix at that moment. But even more importantly, there are somewhat more subtle dynamics that are created just by simply placing the volume of the faders at specific levels and leaving them there. Most people think of balancing the volume of sounds to mean to make them all even. The process is actually much more complex. Often we don't want all of the instruments to be the same volume. We normally want one instrument to be a bit louder than another. In fact, the exact volume relationships between each sound in a mix are very specifically set by a recording engineer. For example, a lead vocal will come across completely different if it is extremely loud in the mix. That is, if it is way out in front of the rest of the mix. Both the singing and the message being transmitted by the lyrics will be perceived completely differently depending on how loud the vocal is in the mix. And you see, this is a dynamic that the engineer controls by where he places the fader in the mix. Actually, the musical dynamics that can be created with volume relationships are much more complex than you might have ever imagined. In fact, traditions have evolved for specific volumes of particular instruments for different types of music and songs. Let's explore them this way.
Now remember, we're discussing relative apparent volumes. You see the apparent volume of a sound is also dependent upon the waveform of a sound. For example, a chainsaw sounds louder to our ear than a flute, even if they are both exact same volume. So the apparent volume is the level that sounds seem to be to our ear.
If we think of volume in decibels, based on sound pressure level, then there are around 140 different levels of volume. But in order to make this wide range of levels more accessible, let's divide them into 6 different levels like this. If we take a look at a mix and divide it into 6 ranges of volume, these are the instruments that we commonly find at each level. Level 1. Sounds at this volume in mixes are unusually loud. In fact, it's quite rare that sounds are ever at this level. The alarm clocks in Time from Dark Side of the Moon, by Pink Floyd's a good example. Explosions and primal screams can also be this loud. Normally though, if an inexperienced engineer places a sound at this volume, it's thought of as an error. Level 2. Sounds at this volume are normally lead instruments and vocals. However, certain songs and types of music will put the vocals here. For example, big band music and middle-of-the-road Barry Manilow type of music. Also, if the vocals or lyrics are the main focus of attention, like in Bob Dylan, they might put the vocals this loud. Likewise, if a song has a great singer, his or her vocals are often placed at this level in the mix. Other instruments found at this volume might include the boom in rap music, or the kick drums or toms in heavy metal. Horn blasts in big band music and symphony blasts in classical music often reach level 2. Level 3. Sounds at this volume normally consist of primary rhythm parts, such as guitar or some type of keyboard. Lead vocals in a lot of rock and roll are also set at this level. Other examples include kick drums in most heavy metal, snare drums in most dance music, most toms in most styles of music, and cymbals, with hi-hat only occasionally at this level, although jazz and dance music often place it here. Phil Collins is probably about the first person to place reverb on the drums at this level, level 3. Level 4. Sounds at this level include rhythm beds and chordal pads such as background piano, keys, or guitar. Drums in a lot of jazz, middle of the road, and easy rock are also at this level. When reverb is noticeable as a sound on its own, it's normally here. Background vocals and strings are also often at this level, but of course they can vary. Level 5. Sounds at this level include things like the kick drum in jazz and big band music. Lots of effects and reverb often get placed here so that you can only hear them if you listen closely. Background vocals sometimes also get relegated to this level. Some producers also use this level to make their mark. Level 6. Sounds at this level are so soft that they are hard to detect. Pink Floyd is famous for adding little whispers or almost subliminal sounds to draw you into the mix. Sounds at this level can be very effective, but it's important they serve to add to the overall mix in some way. If these sounds do not fit just right, they can sound just like noise. This chart of the 6 different levels has only been presented to give us a framework so we can now explore all the different levels for each instrument in different styles of music. As you will see, different instruments are commonly placed at different levels. Let's take a look.
I don't believe it. There she goes again. She's tied it up. I can't find it. All my tubes and wires, level notes. Writing actions.
Now, as previously mentioned, different styles of music have developed their own traditions as to the volume that particular instruments are placed within a mix. Let's look at each type of sound individually. What about vocals? Let's take a look at various examples of vocals being placed at different levels in the mix. Think about it. Vocals are commonly mixed at different levels for different types of music and for different types of songs. For example, probably the loudest we hear vocals is a cappella. Just kidding. Vocals are commonly quite loud in middle of the road music.
I got it back, I got it back, and that ain't good.
Of course, in opera, the vocals are also quite loud. The vocals are commonly mixed loudly in folk music as well.
I'm a guitar man. Whoa. I'm a guitar man. Whoa. I'm a guitar man.
And in big band music,
So when you hear it thunder, don't you run under a tree. There'll be pennies from heaven for you and me. Don't you know there's bound to be pennies from heaven for you and me?
and in country music.
So baby, just leave me and say goodbye. Come on now, let me go, babe. Come on, baby, now let me go. Oh, come on now, let me go.
Besides the style of music dictating the level of vocals, the song can also make a big difference. Songs where the lyrics are the focus of the entire song often have the vocals mixed right out front. Bob Dylan's a perfect example. On the other hand, think of examples where the vocals are mixed quite low as level 4 even. An example of vocals being so low are those in songs by Enya. Commonly, vocals are mixed quite low in a lot of types of rock and roll. Perfect example is Pink Floyd or any alternative rock. Besides the style of music, there are a number of reasons that you might turn the vocals up or down in a mix. If they suck, you normally shouldn't put them out front. Whereas if they're great, show them off. Now, what about snare? Same as with vocals, the volume that a snare is placed in a mix is dependent on the style of music and the song. Big band music and jazz often have the snare mixed quite low as level 4.
Just ask me if you're in doubt, 'cause I'm hip. Now I'm deep into Zen, meditation, and macrobiotics. As soon as I can, I intend to get into narcotics. 'Cause I'm cool as a cute.
It is also interesting to note that a lot of easy rock and ballads commonly mix the snare quite low.
And I know you totally care. Whenever I need you, yeah.
However, some ballads do have a massive snare sound turned up quite loud.
Knew I was waiting. It should have been easy. Oh, Marianne, who did you lie to?
Rock and roll is probably most responsible for the snare's progression up the volume scale. But in the 60s, dance music and then disco helped to raise the level of the snare even another level. These days, some types of rock and roll have the snare as loud as level 2. Now check out kick drums. Again, the style of music makes the biggest difference. Big band music and jazz commonly have the level of the kick drum down around level 4 or even level 5. It's also interesting that even a lot of Jimi Hendrix's music was mixed with the kick drum down around level 4 so that you could hardly hear it. Another interesting thing is that over the last 20 or so years, the kick drum has made its way up the scale, becoming louder and louder in mixes. Heavy metal was probably responsible for raising the kick drum up a whole level. Heavy metal commonly places the kick drum up around level 2. Rap, and now hip-hop, have almost taken it off the top of the scale.
Yeah!
Now, let's take a look at volume levels of bass guitar. Bass guitar started out barely in mixes at all.
Sunday morning, there lies a body, each just oozing life. There's someone sneaking around that corner. Could that someone be Mac the Knife?
In big band, it was down around level 3 or 4. In a lot of jazz, it's actually now quite high, close to level 2. Even in a lot of rock and roll, the bass guitar is not as loud as many people often think, although it does vary a lot. Then began a revolution.
One MC with a speedy DJ, creating the beats with a funky bass line, put into congruence along with my rhyme. The rhymes are flowing, the beats are growing. They said it couldn't happen, but now I'm showing what it takes to make it in this world of music. So now I got to use it. Now back to the jumping, gotta stop slumping, cause you know we gotta do something. Make this party.
Check it out. Even Peter Gabriel has a rap boom on his last album. Not only did rap help to raise the level of bass guitars in mixes, it has also even changed the hardware. When you go to a stereo store, you see things like mega bass and, of course, boom boxes. And stereos are now capable of handling a lot more bass than in the old days. It's also interesting that reggae and the blues often have the level of the bass quite a bit louder than in other styles of music, sometimes as high as level 2.
Ever since you left me, baby, oh, sure been lonely around here. I got every reason for crying, but they ain't got no blues, no, not me, dear.
Commonly, the fewer instruments in a mix, the louder the bass. This is probably because you need something to fill out the space between the speakers. If you have a lot of instruments in a mix, there just isn't enough room for the bass guitar. Also, a bass will mask the other sounds if too loud, so it is often mixed at a low volume to leave more space for the other sounds in the mix. What about toms? Toms are commonly mixed lower than most people think in most types of music. Toms are probably mixed low because often the bleed of the cymbals in the tom mics are annoying. Effects also vary a lot in different mixes. Reverb has progressed up the scale over the years. In fact, it was probably Phil Collins and Genesis who were responsible for raising the level of reverb an entire level. Pink Floyd has just about taken over the title for having the effects the loudest in their mixes. Other sounds like hi-hats, cymbals, rhythm guitars, horn sections, and background vocals are also mixed at various levels depending on the song and the style of music. In fact, you might start checking out the relative level of every sound in every song the rest of your life. As you can see, you can create an incredible variety of musical dynamics based on the level that you set each sound in the mix. And each style of music has developed its own traditions for the specific level that each instrument should be set. Of course, for some styles of music, the traditions are stricter than others. Big band music and jazz are pretty strict, whereas the rules for rap and hip-hop are extremely loose. Also, of course, the song and all of its details can make a big difference as to the levels at which each sound is placed. And finally, the people you are working with can make a big difference. You can only argue so long with someone who's telling you to turn up their instrument or else. But do argue. Give them hell. Besides all of the individual volume levels of each instrument, there are dynamics that can be created with the overall relationships of all of the volume levels in a mix. We call these volume patterns.
For those of you following along, we are now here on the graphic.
In some styles of music, the range of volumes might vary only from here to here. New Age music, alternative rock, middle-of-the-road music, country music, and easy rock are often mixed this way, such that there is very little difference between the softest and loudest sound in the mix. Muzak might be said to be the extreme example. All sounds are pretty even in volume, such that none ever jumps out and shocks us. This might be totally appropriate for a love song. On the other hand, some styles of music are mixed with extreme variations between the softest and loudest sounds, like this. Commonly, lots of rock and roll is mixed this way. Also, big band music is a perfect example of this type of mix. You might have extremely soft sounds followed by huge horn blasts. Pink Floyd's well known for trying to shock the hell out of you with alarm clocks and explosions. It can be quite fun and exhilarating. Besides the style of music, the type of song can also make a big difference as to the overall range of volume levels. For example, a love song might be mixed quite evenly. A song about explosive behavior might be quite uneven.
Here we are again.
Volumes can not only range in dynamics from the softest to the loudest sound in the mix, but an individual sound can be raised and lowered within the song. Anytime faders are moved while a sound is playing, the dynamic created tends to be very intense. If the level of a sound is changed at a good transition point, such as the beginning of a chorus or a lead break, a dynamic's created, but it's not nearly as intense as when changing a sound while it's playing.
Let me show you a magic trick. If you bring a sound out front by turning the volume up at the beginning of a song, you can then turn that sound down, and since we heard it so well, it will be clear in our brain what that sound is doing, even if it is then set back low in the mix. Then bring up another sound in the mix so we can check it out, and then bring it down in the mix, and once we hear a sound loud and clear, it doesn't have to continue to be loud in order to recognize it. If you keep doing this, you can create the illusion that all the sounds in the mix are loud and clear.
Sometimes, of course, the volume of the entire mix can be raised or lowered. The overall volume can be cut or boosted or gradually faded. Such dynamics can be very effective if appropriate for the song. Besides moving a fader to create volume dynamics, commonly you need to adjust levels just to keep the volumes more even. An engineer often must constantly adjust levels up and down just to keep things even. Compressor limiters can only do so much before they make a sound unnatural. Therefore, another dynamic that can be created with the faders is to actually even out the volumes more by moving the faders throughout the mix.